and welcome along to another episode of DePIN Copy Hour. I'm your host, Neil, and this month, the month of August, is airdrop month for Havelo. If you haven't already heard about our airdrop number 2, then just pop along to havelo.com and you'll find all the details on there somewhere, or you can come join us on X. Today, I am thrilled to welcome to the show Prasad from Geode.net, Mark from Streamer, and we have Al from Koi as well. He's having some technical difficulties, so he will be joining us at some point later on. Gents, good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. Do you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what your project is all about?
Hello, Neil. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you gave, for inviting me to this DePIN Coffee Hour. My name is Prasad. I'm taking care of the Geode.net business development for India. So that's what I'm doing it right now. But with my profession, I'm actually a mechanical engineer. Previously, it all started like as a hobby for me, as a passive income. This this DePIN, but now it become kind of a serious. And then now I'm with Geode.net, and then like past 1 year I'm actually with this, and then continuing.
Very good. Is that your first foray into Web3 and digital assets and digital networks?
Yeah.
Very good. How about you, Mark? What's your backstory?
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm a marketing director by trade. I spent 16 or 17 years or so working for big blue chips on household brands, which you'll have heard, and you've probably got in your kitchen and bathroom. And then I came back to London, having worked in Asia for some time. And whilst I was in Asia and China, I was starting going to Bitcoin meetups, and there was talk of Ethereum in those days. Sort of 16, 17, came back to London and decided that then was the time for me to get into Web3 crypto. But at the time, I was really inspired by sort of the promise of decentralization, because I've got an economics background, and I was getting increasingly frustrated with all of the money printing and the kind of causes of that, which we see now more than ever, or the results of that, I should say. And so I started getting into sort of Bitcoin, then Ethereum came along. So yeah, I founded a fintech called Pink, and it was a form of collective intelligence for making price predictions on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Did that for 4.5 years, and then after that I joined Streamer Network, where I currently serve as Chief Commercial Officer and CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. And if you haven't heard of Streamer Network, it's you might think of it as a sort of OG DePIN project. It was funded in 2017, and it's infrastructure for real-time data sharing. So it's a peer-to-peer network that hyperscales. And yeah, I've been there for the last 2.5 years. We are a DePIN, and we sort of serve the DePIN sector, if you like, so that you can use Streamer instead of Google or AWS for your data propagation. And we just launched something called Streamer TV, which is an application layer product for decentralized real-time video streaming. So you might think there's a decentralized version of StreamYard, actually. So yeah,
nice. We'll have to check that out for future episodes.
Yeah, come on over. We're actually restreaming this on Streamer TV now. So if you want to listen to this on Streamer TV, then go to x.com/streamer_TV. There's a link there. Yeah. So you can listen to that.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely check it out, actually, because we've been recently looking at some of the alternatives. StreamYard is actually a really excellent tool, but it starts to get a bit pricey once you're using it as much as we are lately. So anyways, Al, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and Koi and what you're up to at Koi?
Morning. I'm Al. I'm one of the founders of Koi, calling from San Francisco at the moment. Koi is designed to be a global hosting network, though it takes quite a bit of quite a bit of setup to get any kind of completely decentralized hosting online. One of the key things that we differentiate ourselves with is we actually use primarily home devices, so personal laptops, gaming PCs, machines that would otherwise not be used typically for this kind of stuff. What we've set up over the last about 6 months or so, our mainnet launched in January. So in the last 6 months or so, we've moved heavily into the kind of agent-to-agent networks. And so we've been setting up a variety of agent-to-agent systems on top of the network. And what we've kind of found is there's a big need for what you could say kind of open source fundamentals for these agent systems, primarily with open source code running on top of completely open source hardware. We think this is going to be a gigantic market. Pretty excited to discover where that's going to go, though. Lots more coming.
Right.
The big one recently that we've gotten into is actually writing open source code using the nodes. So taking vibe coding to another level, which we're calling tribe coding.
Wow. I'm still trying to catch up with vibe coding. But I'm saying that very much as a marketing person. So yeah, that's fascinating. I think the agentic stuff seems like that side of AI seems to be I feel like that's going to be the next sort of wave of explosive kind of growth.
Exciting opportunity for decentralization too, because you don't really want your agent running on somebody else's cloud, and you probably want to know what's happening under the hood. So we kind of hope that that's going to push for a lot of open source shifts and for hopefully some like residential decentralized computing happening.
Right. So who would you see as being the primary use case for that?
I think individuals probably. The classic examples, like if you have your AI assistant, if your AI assistant knows everything about you, the worst case scenario is if it like is owned by OpenAI, right? Because you don't really want to give complete control and complete access to like a corporate behemoth like that. So it seems to be where it's headed. At the moment, what we're finding is like Web3 companies can actually use sort of decentralized code assistants and things like that to actually help with all the open source code that they already have, because the code's already public. So if you want to recruit your community and get them to help, that works quite well. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting nut to crack.
For sure. Prasad, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to at GeoDNet, and I suppose what are the problems you're solving in the world, and what do we have to look forward to in the future?
Yeah, I could say GeoDNet is, you can say it's a DePIN project that everybody knows by now. The best way of being participating in this is just buy a station and set it up on your home and start getting tokens, and this become a part of a network, and we can call these are like kind of permanent reference stations, which will give the corrections data to the users. The customers typically are ranging from surveyors to autonomous driving, and the future AI robots, everything it's going to be kind of a very, very critical infrastructure what we are building, which is currently not possible with the traditional or centralized way of building it. So I could say as on today, we are already kind of almost like 4 times, nearly 4 times bigger than the next Web2 companies in terms of size of the network. And I would say I'm more like to tell about what's happening with India. So India, we are a kind of we don't have any private network like this. So we have only the state network, and then we already kind of bigger than them. It's like we have more than 1,200 stations live, and then they're giving the corrections data to the current presently it is for the surveying companies who are using our data, and they're also paying us. So I don't say
just for the average person, so they understand what you guys are all about. My understanding is that with GPS systems, they can be correct or incorrect, plus or minus like a few meters, which is obviously no use when you're talking about autonomous vehicles or other things that need to be very precise about how they're, like, for example, one of one of the things that I'm interested in is flying like drone taxis, basically, like where you can just jump in an Uber that flies you home.
Yeah.
You don't want that to be a meter out, especially when it's trying to.
So that's exactly what we are trying to solve. Basically, the location correction services is pretty much very costly with the centralized way of building it. So that's where we are trying to kind of leverage. And I see the decentralized way of building this kind of network is kind of cost a fraction. Even now also, I would say, like in India, like there are some states which are trying to build their own local course network, which is kind of more than 20 to 30 times costlier than the network what we are building it. That's pretty very costly for India, we can say. And these correction services are very, very critical to you talk about that very precise, where people want to get this accuracy to centimeters. Yeah,
right.
That's what JournIt is solving as a very, very big problem of location corrections, which is currently like not possible with the traditional way of building and scaling it up.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Just to go back to Streamer, obviously Streamer TV, I think that's something that everybody can understand and get their arms around. But the core products, what you were building before the TV product, was that my understanding, and again, correct me if this is completely wrong, but my understanding is it's about like data feeds. So like when I read about it at first, I was thinking about things like I don't know, like Bloomberg Terminal or something like that sends kind of this stream of data that's kind of fairly consistent that you might want to log into to see what live data is about a particular thing. It could be stock movements in that case, but it could be anything. Is that right? Or
pretty much right. We refer to it as data pipelines rather than data feeds. So the way to think about Streamer network and protocol, which is the technology that we've been building for the last 5 years or so, think of it as a mesh overlay network, and think of it as kind of one-to-many or many-to-many or many-to-one data pipelines that you can arrange and configure as you see fit. And it propagates data in what's called a publish-subscribe pattern, so aka pub-sub, which is a well-trodden path for traditional Web2 developer in terms of toolkit for propagating data. And one of the interesting things about the technology, the core benefit of it is that because it's peer-to-peer and you've got published subscribers all arranged in the peer-to-peer format, it hyperscales. So it's quite a difficult thing to explain without a chart, so bear with me. But essentially, the more subscribers to a data stream that you have, the more efficient it becomes in propagating data, because it's sending data in a 1-to-4 format, and the 4 receivers or subscribers are then sending on to the next 4, and those 4 sending on to the next 4, and so on. What happens is you get this kind of inverse parabola of efficiency and latency, meaning that even at 1 million subscribers of the video stream, we're sub-half second in terms of latency. And Neil, you touched on it at the beginning of this call, but if you're using StreamYard and such centralized services at scale, it can get quite expensive quite quickly. So we think the future of live video streaming is serverless, maybe not in entirety, but we've certainly got a really strong role to play there. And what's really interesting about that is when we start thinking about businesses that could be built on top of the decentralized protocol and network, the starting point is that they have an inherent cost advantage because it's DePIN. And so when we have conversations with other DePIN projects, quite often, especially infrastructure DePIN projects, they see this kind of inherent cost advantage because the CapEx requirement isn't there, it doesn't sit in the P&L, it's distributed across the community. So, we've done a lot of sort of desk research and, various tests and what have you, and we're highly confident that our video streaming service that we're building with Streamer TV is at least 10 times cheaper than using AWS. And I'm lowballing it there. So that's this sort of hyperscaling feature of serverless peer-to-peer technology is one commercial sort of advantage of our underlying technology. That's that. And then the whole other part about Streamer Network and the protocol is, of course, because it's decentralized, it's entirely permissionless and censorship resistant. So that has lots of implications for applications like video streaming. But the way to think about a protocol on the network is it is decentralized. And so whilst we built the technology, anyone can come on and at the click of a few buttons, they can spawn their own mesh overlay network, which is peer-to-peer, it hyperscales, it's one-to-many, it's many-to-one. And so, like, who would use such technology? Well, a good example is Demo. So Demo, fairly high-profile DePIN project that was built from the ground up on Streamer. So, their cars are connected to the Streamer network, and any data coming from a miner that's sitting in a car comes via the Streamer network on their own, mesh overlay network.
Okay, cool. So is there an issue, or is one of the challenges that you guys have to solve in like service level delivery on that side of things? Like, how do you, networks are so different in terms of quality, the symmetry of connections and things like that. Is that a big problem that you have to solve, where in certain geographies, there wouldn't be the same quality of connectivity maybe?
Yeah,
or is that, do you just see that as being a problem of the past?
No. So I think, geographical considerations are key. So like just taking a step back, what is Streamer Network doing? It's leveraging latent bandwidth. So if you have a device that is connected to the internet and it's not using all of that bandwidth, what we're doing as a DePIN is leveraging that latent internet bandwidth. And so we're using that to send data across this kind of decentralized community network. So one of the hygiene factors for participating as a node is that you have good internet connectivity. Now, there are two different types of nodes in the Streamer network. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially there are light nodes which might sit inside another DePIN device, like a Demo device in a car. And there's also what we have what's called operator nodes. So operator nodes are, Web3 enthusiasts, let's call them professional full-time node runners. To be a good node or good actor, they have to have 24/7 good internet connectivity. And if they don't, then of course their rewards are slashed. So the tokenomics are kind of designed in such a way to incentivize that consistent bandwidth. That's crucial to Streamer Network.
Very good. I guess just about Koi, Al, and what you guys are up to. My understanding is originally Koi was about attention and paying creators for their kind of essentially trying to democratize, I suppose, the wealth creation or the value creation that Meta and other platforms were sort of essentially capturing in Web 2. Is the agent-to-agent thing something completely new, or are we talking about sort of an evolution? How do you see that? And do you think that's the future for Koi, or is everything still running the way it always intended?
Sort of the right point. We did start using an attention token in the Arweave community. So we were handing out tokens during our pre-mine based on attention. The thesis there was that people who are providing compute into the network need a fair and reasonable way to earn some kind of rewards. But a home computer is not actually the primary value on a home computer isn't coming from the compute itself. It's usually coming from co-location. It's coming from the account somebody has access to. It's coming from some kind of other value that they're bringing to the network. So we started out with this concept that there's social value of compute. And that's kind of led us most of the way down the path. At the moment, what we have online is a fairly large compute network. So we have a couple 100,000 people that have installed the app and are now providing compute. We've kind of honed in a little bit more on agent-to-agent stack. One of the things that led us in this direction was when they put the block up on the Twitter API. So after Elon took over Twitter about 1.5 years ago, we were using the Twitter API quite extensively. And so we noticed that we could just get people to give us accounts on their computers. And so that's a pretty easy way. If you have access to a whole bunch of Twitter accounts, you can access the Twitter Firehose the same way that you would if you actually paid for the API. And so we've kind of gone on that direction for quite a while in terms of providing data to agents and to kind of the agentic stack. The more interesting thing recently has been trying to create a sort of a proxy for security and for privacy on a fully decentralized cloud. And this has become, I think, quickly the arms race in this industry. The reason for it is that, and for the same reason that we were interested in the attention economy, the main reason behind all of this is that if you have any kind of a large service provider, they're typically going to be paying for the hosting costs, and you pay them with your eyeballs or with some sort of ad click-through rate and or subscription payments. And subscription payments still haven't quite caught on for most of these things. So while X has been pretty successful in getting people to pay for subscriptions, most people don't really want to pay for the subscriptions. They begrudgingly will shell out a small amount of money so that they can get like plus features. They get to schedule their posts on X or whatever. But ultimately, the reason behind this is the team at X have to pay for the hosting cost. And what we wanted to do is try to disconnect this cycle. In the agent-to-agent economy, it's actually a really interesting. It's a really interesting problem where you would prefer not to give all of your data over to these larger institutions. But at the same time, you also have a significant hosting cost that goes into actually providing any kind of agentic stack. With the more recent models that have been coming out recently, they're getting smaller and smaller in terms of the number of parameters that are needed to produce like reasonably good results. So we're trying to put together sort of a fabric of different products that complement an agentic stack. And then at the same time, that gives you quite a bit more privacy that your agents are running as expected. The big thing recently is we've been indexing our nodes, and it turns out that actually like a large portion of our devices on our network have actually been like trusted execution environment compatible for quite a while. So we've brought out a large number of these trusted execution environments. I think we've got about 10,000 or so of them that are credentialed. And so that means that we now have about 10,000 private compute boxes. If people aren't familiar, the trusted execution environment framework means that you can have a system on a chip on a device. So it could be my laptop, but it can be your chip for an hour. And you can rent the use of the chip. You encrypt data directly to the chip. Code runs on the chip, and then you get back the outputs. But nobody can see it, including me, even if it's my computer that I'm renting to, which is pretty cool.
Oh,
so there's a variety of things with that I think are leading the way. The other side of it, obviously, there's some big cost advantages to DePIN mining. But I think the big thing that we're going to see in the industry here is going to be a demand cycle issue. So I think probably what we're all seeing with altcoins right now is that there's a pretty significant slump in where the market's going, and we've seen like a big consolidation, mostly because new retail investors are coming in and they're very interested in Ethereum and Bitcoin, but they don't really know about all this other stuff. And it's just like it's a bit too complicated for them to figure out what's going on. So what we're kind of thinking is there's a significant market out there, and if you can actually satisfy a consumer need, then that's where the real power comes from. That being said, I think DePIN's been chasing consumer needs for quite a while. So we've been in parallel selling very similar type of product to what we do in the decentralized space, but to enterprises directly. And so that's kind of been the probably last 6 to 8 months or so. And then we shoehorn in with the decentralization wherever we can to cut costs, which has been kind of the best way to do it.
Cool. So on the demand side, you guys are actually actively courting enterprise clients, because it feels like, well, I don't know, again, this is very much limited on having these conversations on the show and from the Velo side of things as well, where we would be, I suppose, providers of supply to a certain extent to DePINs, and feels like there's a lot of focus on the supply side and not on the demand, like as in
it's always been the issue. Yeah, crypto
building the
in
network
general
rather
is
than
very
selling the
good at
network.
supply side. It's very hard to get crypto to drive demand, unfortunately. So we're finding is almost that we need to have sort of a second side of our business that's primarily just like direct enterprise consulting. The cool thing that we have noticed, though, is a lot of the core technologies like cryptographic proofs and primitives, things like trusted execution environments. A lot of that core tech that we understand really well is the same tech that's needed for the enterprises to actually adopt these technologies. And actually, if you look at the SOC 2 compliance guidelines, which are the primary like AI agent guidelines that have come out in the US, the SOC 2 compliance guidelines effectively are completely satisfied by a decentralized network with trusted execution and cryptographic primitives. But it is very hard for most of the AI people to ever adopt that. So if you've got some website that's like a ChatGPT wrapper, they'll almost never be SOC compliant because they don't do it. But in the case of these decentralized networks, we have a lot of the core technologies already in place. So it's just a matter of going out and telling the market.
Yeah, it's really important for certain players in the market. Just while you're talking, somebody in our community has asked, or someone on the stream has asked, what are the requirements for coin mining? Do you want to quickly deal with that?
0. You just install the app on your computer. Nice and simple.
Okay, you need a computer.
You need a computer. That's the only thing. You need a computer and an internet connection. If you don't have an internet connection, we don't know that you exist. So we need you to have that. That's about it.
Right.
There've been some interesting ones. Recently, a company came to us that is doing a lot of healthcare agents. So in that particular case, they need specifically a trusted execution environment. But if you have an Intel chip that's been issued in the last 5 years, then they're TE compatible. So that's usually the easiest way. Some of the more recent AMD chips as well. But we have an app that you install, and then the app will tell you, which is usually the easiest way.
Right. All right. All right. Somebody's asked, Prasad, can you talk about the proposed migration to Solana and what's driving that push from Bob? Thanks, Bob.
I think we just wait for a few hours. We have a JIP 7. Mike is going to talking more about this migration. JIP is like JORNet Improvement Protocol. That's going to be, we take it to the community and then the proposal, and let's discuss on that part. Yeah, but in general, I see Solana is more vibrant. I see it's going to be kind of going to help us much more in terms of project. And second part is like on terms of hardware part. This Solana phone, that's the new Seeker, that's going to have the correction service of JORNet automatically. That means the same thing what was costing a lot before get corrections. You can directly see it on the phone, which is kind of a centimeter level accuracy. So that's, I can say. So it means we're trying to build a better ecosystem with Solana, and I think the directions looks like that only.
Yeah, fast and cheap, and they have a mobile device. Yes. Fair enough. Those are all good reasons. I'm just going to do some more questions. Just there's a whole bunch of questions coming in from listeners or viewers, I guess. So can we expect coin mining with Havelo node? Who knows? Maybe. Certainly it's not outside of the realms of possibility.
One note on that one is once you've integrated the standard for Koi, you can mine all of the other tokens that are coming out. So it does make it a little bit interesting. I know the Havelo flow is a little bit more straightforward, where you guys have like a standard token you're giving out to people. One of the big advantages of having Koi integrated, though, is we've got a variety of different kind of community-based projects as well, which aren't purely financial. Which in this in the way the market's at the moment, it can be a little bit fun to be able to donate your computing to something else. One of the big ones recently is somebody is now using Koi nodes to basically do all the LiDAR scans from underneath the pyramids and a variety of other like large architectural zones. So there's all these satellites flying around that are gathering LiDAR scans underneath the ground at large architectural sites. And the one that came out recently is they've got about like, I think the top 100 to 200 meters underneath the ground, underneath the pyramids. So somebody's got all that data and is now pushing that through the Koi network, which can be something fun to throw your computer at if people are interested.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of interesting anyway. Yeah, I think I don't know. You can earn a bunch of different tokens with Havelo. I wouldn't rule out anything in the future really. It's definitely, we're still in beta, so there's a lot of evolution happening there, and yeah, I mean ultimately we want to make the being a node runner as profitable as possible for anybody who has resources that they want to lend. So anything is possible. Let's see. Can any of the guests, actually, this is a topic that I wanted to talk about because of the fact that I think one of the things that all of the projects here have in common is around data, and data being the sort of the fourth, maybe the most important, but when you think about AI, it's it's chips, it's electricity, and data, and then obviously compute. So I'm just wondering, Bob's question: can any of the guests talk about how they're monetizing the project and how that revenue makes its way back to the token? I think that's sort of probably more direct way of talking about monetizing data.
I'll kick off on it. Let's get started. I think it's a great question from Bob, and I think Al just touched on it in that Web3 and DePIN is very sort of supply side focused, and we see it a lot with new DePIN projects coming in. Mint a token, issue a bunch of miners, build a community. That playbook is a well-trodden path. Obviously was established by Ethereum some years ago, which kind of started off the DePIN segment, you might argue. But I think what we're seeing now with newer DePIN projects is they're much more focused on the demand side. I'd like to think anyway. With Streamer, we've been on that journey over the last kind of 5 to 6 years. It's been tough. Like, we started with a protocol and network, and we got some traction, and you might say product market fit in the Web3 space. We had other DePIN projects using Streamer, but the amount of data coming through the network just wasn't enough. We want more, for this fantastic technology. So that's why we're building Streamer TV, this application layer product, because we've thought really long and hard about, okay, how do we really get lots of demand for our technology? So Streamer TV, I like to think that we've really sort of focused on the UX challenge. So you don't have to connect to a Web3 wallet or anything like that. It's one click to live stream in a decentralized manner. It's censorship resistant, it's permissionless, it's all of those great things in Web3, but it's kind of taken away the friction points of Web3. And so I wouldn't call it Web 2.5, but it's a nice, I think it's a clean execution that is going to help us get much, much more demand for the underlying technology. Just to go to Bob's question then about how we're monetizing the project. In our MVP, straight away, the first feature that we're adding is a sort of tipping service. It means that if you're a content creator on Streamer TV, you can receive tips from your audience. Going back to the kind of UX challenge, the first tipping feature isn't a crypto payment rail, it's using Stripe, which is almost laughable for a Web3 project, but we did it because it's easy and because it's lean and because it's an MVP. And also because we think the majority of people using our product aren't going to be crypto natives. And so, one of the use cases we know that we're going to get traction on, and we've already got traction on, is kind of grassroots sports streaming. And so the audience are kind of football dads on a Sunday morning, or basketball coaches in the States, and they're not going to want to connect to Web3 wallet and add an Ethereum wallet address and all the rest of it. So, it's not a compromise being a Web3 purist or decentralist. It's more about optimization is the way that I view it, to really try and crack that demand side problem, which is difficult for most DePIN projects. And then so just going back to Bob's question, just to answer that more directly, we're adding this tipping feature. 90% of the value of that goes to the content creator, which is in line with Kick and such platforms. We might make it higher in the future, it might be lower, but we want to get as much value back to the content creator as possible. Streamer's taking 7.5% of that, which will go. We're not sure how we're going to use that against tokenomics yet, but we're working on that now, and I think a couple of months from now we'll announce how that revenue generation is going to support the token price. Ultimately, what we want to get into is kind of putting the tokens into a vault or token burn mechanisms that are paid for from that real world revenue generation, in blunt terms, in simple terms. So that's where we are on the journey with Streamer. I think just to reflect on the DePIN industry as a whole, like what I see is I just see more projects getting smarter about this question, and they have to be, because otherwise they're not going to be here in 5 years' time. Yeah. And bull markets come and go, and the weaker projects that haven't answered this question aren't going to be here.
Great.
So.
Al, Prasad, do you guys want to?
Yeah. For JoinNet, right now, the customers who pays us, it's like it goes on subscription, like yearly or monthly, and once they pay, we have like 80% of the revenue we use it to buy back and burn the tokens. That's what actually happens. But internally, if it is like for me, like from India, the customers who pays, they'll be paying in INR. It's not in US dollars or JAR tokens. So I transfer this in wire, and then it will happen at the team at JoinNet. Yeah.
Okay, it works its way through to the token.
Yeah, so there's two sides to this. I think we ran a small economics think tank in like 2016 and 2017 in Chicago, and even back then it was pretty much the same two options. Which there's one way, which is the really long-term approach, which is to try to run a network in such a way that it actually grows and has native tokenomics. So in native tokenomics, you don't really need to do the buy and burn thing, basically because the network grows large enough that it is self-sustaining. There's only a few networks that have actually reached that. I think arguably Solana is now kind of crossing the chasm and has almost reached self-sustaining territory. Ethereum and Bitcoin would be the other two. Aside from those three, really none of the decentralized ecosystems out there have even gotten close to a sustainable tokenomics model. Short of having fully sustainable, like decentralized tokenomics, where you've got enough holders to keep the network afloat, the only other option really is a buy and burn, a consistent buy and burn. So we've implemented kind of as a stopgap to hold our token price on the floor, a buy and burn model over the last like 3 months, and that's been fairly effective. Now, of course, the issue is, if our revenues grow massively in our less decentralized parts where we're serving enterprises directly, how do we guarantee that we're actually going to be transferring that back to the community? And so what we've implemented for most of our systems is a direct buy and burn that's actually part of the SaaS product, where we're not even actually touching it, and there's just a guaranteed buyer. The other thing that we have done, though, which I think is probably the more fun and more decentralized approach, is that we've implemented a few of our products like Prometheus Swarm. So Prometheus Swarm is the ability to basically create an issue on a GitHub and then have it immediately filled by a network of nodes that write software. And so you can put up a bounty in any token. So any of the three of you who have tokens, you can actually put up your bounty in that token on a GitHub repo, and then our vibe coding nodes will show up and actually do the work, and then other nodes will come in and actually audit their work and that kind of thing. And so what we've done with that is we've created that as a protocol in the middle between what we do as an enterprise consultant and what we do as a node network. And so what this means is if we go into an enterprise and we actually pitch them through Tribe, which is our primary enterprise business, Tribe actually uses Prometheus under the hood. And so if Tribe is paying Prometheus, then everything that comes from Tribe to Prometheus is going to, in a fixed rate, result in a token buyback. And so I think a lot of those types of applications work pretty well. But the trick is, again, it's protocols and protocol saturation, and those take quite a while to grow. So it makes everything quite speculative, which is, I think, why we're seeing this sort of consolidation cycle in the market. But I think what I've noticed from this is it seems like the entire DePIN industry is now on the same page with this, unfortunately, which is we all need to buy back tokens, but we also have to cover our operating costs. So it does seem like the sustainable cycle is coming next year.
Fingers crossed.
I have to hope.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, Bob, for that question. This is just more of a general kind of a question. I think it assumes that most people find it difficult to migrate. I don't know if anybody wants to take this. My personal opinion is I don't think the UI, the UX has been great with Web3. I think a lot of people just simply don't want to self-custody and be solely responsible for their wealth when it comes to the financial side. And as a last kind of a piece, not all businesses make sense in Web3.
Definitely true.
My personal opinion.
Also, it's a semantics point where, if you have to explain it, then it's probably too complicated for the average person, right?
Exactly.
If we've got to say,
and even still,
that means
even still, in 2025, the last show I was at, I was looking at some of the marketing of some of the projects there, reading it, going. I had to read it 3 times just to try and understand what it was. And, I've been in the space for 7 years. If I can't understand it first time, good luck, So I think there's a bit of a job to do there as well, maybe. Some of it's quite technical still. All right, what else have we got here?
On that note, I think standard language is really important. So one of the best, our highest success rate is with Uber drivers. So Uber drivers love coin nodes because it's very simple. It's just Airbnb for your computer. And that saves a lot of time in terms of explaining it. And the fact that the rewards come in crypto is not something we even really need to talk about because you sort that out later,
Right. Yeah.
Seems to be the way the world's heading.
For me, one of our founders always says that about Havelo as well, the Airbnb for your PC.
Right.
Sorry, Prasad, what were you going to say?
Yeah. For me, I think it will just a matter of time. I see, like, even now, in India perspective, I see, like, when I'm actually connecting to surveyors and who are actually using our data, they're kind of, very excited to understand, it gives tokens, it actually makes a passive income. So it is just about a matter of time, when the regulations are going to be, set right. I think they'll be happy to be into completely Web3.
Right. There's a question here for you, Prasad, from Bob again. Bob is our question machine gun of the day. Any thoughts on partnering with DABA in India for dual mining device?
Yeah, definitely. I think we have actually, I didn't talk to Shubs, but I will look into that definitely.
Yeah. That's kind of, I suppose, an additional point on the Web 2, Web 3 thing. So I guess I usually like to try and talk about the future as we get towards the end of the show. Like, do you guys all want to talk about where you see your projects in 5 years and how you see the world being different and what your project's role in changing that's going to be in shaping the new future? And maybe if you want to just take it in order of the I was going to say in order of the people on my screen, but you guys can't see that. So Prasad, then Mark, then Al, please.
Yeah, I think one thing I can say with the JoinNet on the locations correction services, it's going to be kind of more revolution that's happening already, and that's like going to become like kind of new normal in the coming years, like maybe in the next 4 or 5 years. It's going to be kind of one of the location layer for anything which is actually requires the precise location of its own coordinate when it's moving. So that's where actually I think JoinNet network, the RTK network, is going to be very helpful. And being in the Web3 side, I think it's going to be kind of very easy. Whoever it is, it's like somebody can build on top of this network to use it and make it anything. It's like like one example, like the GeoPulse is a device which actually you can put it in a car and then you get the car navigation to be a lane level accuracy, right? But this is from the JoinNet, but anybody can build similar device which can be even very low cost. Today it is like what we are offering is at a price somebody could bring tomorrow at half the price. Still they can get the corrections of our network, which kind of makes it more viable in the coming days. And this kind of location layer, what I see like going to become like kind of very phenomenal change. And then we talk about AI robots. I think that's a new era that's just starting. I think we'll be in that position where it's going to be kind of undeniable by the Web 2 entities in the coming days. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Prasad. Mark?
Yeah, 5 years from now, I believe and hope that Streamer TV will have cemented its position as a viable alternative to centralized video streaming platforms. We don't know exactly what we're going after yet, whether it's decentralized Google Meet or decentralized Twitch or some other use case. We're finding that out now, but I do believe we'll get there. And the reason is that I think the inherent benefits of decentralized technologies are increasingly important. Permissionless access, censorship resistance, ownership of data is key, especially with the onset of AI. It's coming on thick and fast. And if you understand technology and you think about it, then the scary thing that should be keeping you up at night is these massive tech conglomerates out of Silicon Valley and China that are going to be sitting on all of this data. And in Web 2, we've seen the problems that this creates with Google and Facebook. Well, times that by 100, and then you start to understand the problem with this onset of AI. So I see, there's this sort of perfect marriage of Web3 and AI. Like the two go hand in hand. Like this is the role that Web3 is going to play. And so, data ownership is key. I think Stream will have a role to play with that, and I think the DePIN industry is going to be successful for that reason. So whether we'll get there in 5 years or not, I don't know. The adoption of Web3 technologies is very slow, as we've all experienced, because it's complicated and there's a lot of friction points. But we're going in the right direction. There's a lot of talent in the industry. There's a lot of great projects. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people working in the space for sure. I think part of the slow adoption thing, I think, is partially this is a personal opinion, but I think that's partially the way it is with financial systems in particular. Like a good friend of mine works for a bank, and I mean, they're some of their systems are just ancient. They're just so risk adverse, let's say.
Yeah.
Just a personal opinion, but it will change.
Yeah, it's partly that, as lack of regulatory clarity, which is coming now. But also, the Web3 industry is trying to take on very entrenched companies with massive resources. We're trying to disrupt that. That doesn't happen overnight. And I think what happens is Web3 communities get impatient because they're sitting on their bags and they want them to go to the moon and all the rest of it. But think about how long it took for the internet to establish itself. And that took 10 years between Web 1 and Web 2.0. And we're probably 7 years into Web 3, so maybe 5 years from now we'll made a bit of a dent. But I don't think, and obviously Web 3 probably isn't going to surpass or replace Web 2. It sits alongside for those that are privacy conscious, and it plays a better role. That's why we all got into Web 3 in the first place, was to try and make a better internet, essentially. So now that's more important than ever, in my opinion. So the time is right.
It does seem to be heading that way. I think the one saving grace is this notion of like the compliance side of AI agents is particularly relevant right now. We've been talking to a company that does a lot of healthcare agents, but I think this is like there is quickly a really significant market growing for actually like proper cryptography systems and proper open source. The issue is that the more open source that these products are, the less of a moat that they have. And so unfortunately, open source products help create closed source products as well as more open source products. And so if you create a really good open source framework, what you've done is accelerated a whole bunch of people who would have otherwise probably had a hard time building their own product. And I think we've seen this kind of this back and forth happen a few times. Crypto led to a bunch of this. There's obviously like things like Ripple that have ripped off Bitcoin. And so you've got closed source networks or like closed-ish networks that have now ripped off open source products. And that kind of teeter-totter runs back and forth until it gets until everybody gets tired out, I think. The advantage though is there's still a Schelling point principle here. And so in the same way that Bitcoin has become the granddaddy of currency systems, we're going to probably see a similar thing happen around the AI side, and there's probably going to be a big consolidation cycle. And then in the same way that we've got Mac, Windows, and Linux. In the same way that there's a Linux in that set where there's something that's a standard, that's an open system. The reason that Linux exists is because real DevOps engineers typically don't want to deal with setting up things in Windows. And they do sometimes, depending on the industry that they're in. But if they're really serious, they probably are using Linux systems. And then because Mac has aligned with the Linux ecosystem, and actually, if you look at the history of Apple, in a big way, the contributions to open source with the Linux Foundation led to the creation of Mac as a separate operating system from Windows, which is kind of like the Ripple example, unfortunately, for Apple. And I think these things do tend to kind of flow that way. The nice thing, though, is that because of the existence of Linux within that ecosystem, there is a tendency towards open source. And if you're an engineer working on these kinds of systems, what you've probably learned over the course of using computing systems is that Windows is a pain in the ass. The reason Windows is a pain in the ass is because there's a whole bunch of libraries at different points in the stack that you can't see into that are not open source. And when you're dealing with debugging a system, if part of the stack is not open source, then you don't know what's going on in there. And you have to treat it like a black box. And the more of those black boxes that there are, the harder it is to actually build with these systems. And now this is well and good if you're a human engineer, but if you're an AI engineer, you actually can't work with a black box system typically. And it makes it incredibly difficult, it makes it very expensive. And I think this is going to lead towards larger and larger use of open source. So I was at a symposium at Berkeley yesterday, and the big topic there has just been, can we move into a world of open source, and what will that look like? And the typical answer that you get from people is that we are going to head into a very open source friendly world, because just AI agents are not interested in working with closed source systems. And they will always deviate towards the more open source option because it gives them a higher confidence that they're going to be able to satisfy the customer's need. And so if you ask an AI software agent to write you code, it will almost never use a closed source library. It'll almost always use an open source library because it can't give you a good answer otherwise. We're kind of indexing on that direction, which I think is hopefully going to be very powerful over the next couple of years. And the thing that we're seeing is that there's going to be a whole bunch of primitives, protocols, and systems which agents prefer over the others. And if those open source protocols and standards end up being things that are decentralized, then we'll be in a really, really different world in a couple of years. And so we're leaning headlong into actually being able to build out those systems. Last month, I think we wrote about like 20,000 PRs, like pull requests on GitHub. And in March and February, we were doing about like 10 to 12,000. And so this is all happening autonomously with just like agents running on people's computers. The quality was not great in February when we first started out doing this. We were running like mostly tests. The quality in March was quite a bit better. And the more recent quality that we've been getting out of these things is incredible. So if you compare this to where these kind of like AI code gen agents were at last year, in 2024, most of the time they were acting like an intern. And so you could trust them to do something very basic one time, but you couldn't trust them all the time. The ones that we're getting now are pretty consistently knocking out like, mid to low tier issues. So if you give them something mediocre that they need to do, they can knock it out like pretty much the first time, which is a one shot, which means you tell them what you need and then they do the job, which is actually easier than working with a team, which is pretty cool. And I think probably by next year, we're going to see these AI agents writing code better than most of our engineers, which is pretty cool.
Well, what was the variable that changed between, say, February and like May in your example about?
Coordination's been our main thing. So being able to get the agents to work in parallel has been really hard. And then we also, we've worked a lot on making sure that when a computer is talking to a person, the person is using specific language. And making sure that the person uses specific language seems to be the most important factor. It's kind of like if you're talking to ChatGPT, everybody got into prompt engineering last year. The big thing in AI code gen right now is context engineering. So with context engineering, it's all about everything that you say and making sure that everything is in the context. And if you don't put everything in the context and you don't organize it properly, then your agent's always going to do a bad job. Because at the end of the day, they're Cypher, right? So they're going to do exactly what they're supposed to do. But yeah, we've been getting much better results lately. Tribe, which is our new product, is available at tribecode.ai. And so you can actually even run it locally, and you can get a cluster of agents running on your computer, which is a pretty cool one. And we're working on plugging Koi into the back end of that now. So you can get the other thing about this that's cool is it's not like having a team of engineers where you have a sprint plan and it takes 1 week to get your first 5 people to work on these 5 things, and the next week the 5 people work on 5 different things. With these, you can horizontally scale the entire system. So we started out first doing this with Koi. The first cluster we ran was about 1,000 nodes that were all writing code in parallel. So we did 12,000 pull requests, but we did 12,000 pull requests at the same time, which is pretty cool. So anything that's not a dependency, you can have it in parallel. So that I think is really exciting. I do think we're probably going to see like a mirror and a map of Web 2 that is open source, and the agents are just going to quickly scurry across the bridge and go over into this new world. But I think probably the average person won't know that this is happening. They'll just be talking to an agent, and it'll just be doing something in the background, which that obfuscation is very helpful.
If you've got loads of nodes and they're all writing code in parallel, where does the human element come into it? Or is it literally a case of the human element is essentially prompt it at the start what you want and then wait until it spits out your application or whatever the sort of...
Yeah, humans are here for ideas and feedback. That's pretty much it.
Right.
I think pretty much we're pretty bad at almost everything else, actually.
Yeah, I've listened to some very interesting conversations about that recently, about the application of intelligence and that kind of thing. Seems like we're basically biologically designed to try and avoid being intelligent as much as possible through like autonomous loops that we create in our lives and stuff like that.
We're pretty inconsistent too. This has been a big thing in like the health community for a while. If you wake up early in the morning and then you don't like move or get sunlight, you will be less intelligent that day than you were the previous day, which is pretty bad actually for product outcomes, because it means if it's raining where your employees are, then your company's less productive that day, or it's more productive depending on if they go outside and walk around in the rain, or if they've got a heat lamp or whatever, which is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So there's some tipping points coming, I think, but definitely really exciting and positive things from the agentic side of the economy. I think really just the key takeaway from my big rant there is just that agents prefer open source and potentially decentralized protocols, just because the SLAs are more standard and they actually know what's going on under the hood, so you can actually iterate a lot faster. And that seems to be a dominant trend that's probably not going anywhere. So we're just leaning into that quite heavily.
Cool. Makes sense logically. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. Do you all want to just tell everybody where they can find more out about what you're working on, your project, where they can follow you on social media, etc.? Website URLs or anything you want to share, and some final last words?
Yeah, I'll kick off. Follow Streamer Network on X at Streamer, Streamer TV at Streamer_TV. Go to streamer.network and hit the Discord link if you want to join the community. We hold a build and public call every Thursday afternoon. Come along, have a chat with me, tell us what features you want in the product, and we'll put in the roadmap and build it for you.
Nice. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, please follow JournNet Discord and Telegram channels, and we are on X also, and LinkedIn as well. So you get to know more updates, and I think that's good.
Thanks
For me, Koi, K-O-I-I on Google gets you all the links and stuff. KOI.network is where you can get the node and start mining our tokens. And then if you're interested in vibe coding AI agents, we've got Prometheus Swarm.ai and Tribecode.ai that are both new products we've been working on.
All right. Thanks so much, gents. That's it for this week again. So I guess we will see you all next week for another episode. Until then, have a great week. Havelo.com if you want to try out Havelo. And again, this is airdrop month, so keep an eye on our social media on Havelo Official on X, and we will be sharing all the details of the upcoming airdrop there, including dates, snapshot dates, all that fun stuff. That'll all be out this week. So thanks again to all of our guests, and especially thanks to everybody who's tuned in for the live stream. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.